Control opens with a line warning the listener that this is going to be weirder than usual, and that's about the most accurate thing that can be said about the game as a whole, without giving too much away. Fans of Remedy's previous work such as Alan Wake or Quantum Break might go in expecting some degree of strangeness, but Control stands head and shoulders above these in terms of just how weird things can get. But being weird doesn't necessarily make for a good game, and Control understands this, supplementing its overall oddity with some really solid gameplay and engaging world building. The game takes place in the Federal Bureau of Control, a sprawling government organization whose purpose is to investigate and obfuscate events, items, and people related to the paranatural, any phenomena that might be supernatural or hint at the cosmic secrets lurking behind the seams of our world. Players control Jessie Faden, a young woman searching for her brother in the FBC building when it's put on lockdown, thanks to the presence of a mysterious invading force. As far as stories go, Control is weird, surprising, and absolutely gripping. It deals heavily in urban legends, conspiracy theories, and cover-ups, and never gives you all the information, which is as effective a way as any at keeping players hooked. With that said, if you're the type who wants answers for every question raised, you're almost guaranteed to come away at least a little frustrated. To that end, Control does have a little trouble sticking the landing, but in a game like this, I find the journey to be more important than the destination, especially when even the tiniest scraps of information are bound to send you spiraling deeper and deeper down this crazy rabbit hole. This descent into the strange is made that much more effective thanks to Control's visual style, clashing realistic characters and mundane office trappings with reality warping geometry and some fantastic use of impossible space. The look of Control's environments on their own are striking enough, featuring sterile tones and plenty of smooth, angular forms that achieve an eerie, almost soulless vibe, though this is admittedly helped along by the ever-present floating corpses. Control's audio design is similarly eerie and surprising. The aforementioned floating corpses emit this constant, distorted whispering which kept me personally on edge even when there were no direct threats around. The game is accompanied by a soundtrack filled with bassy, electronic tracks which you might expect from a creepy sci-fi property, but occasionally the game will throw a vocal rock track or something at you. It's not common by any means, but when Control does throw a dynamic audio curveball like this at you, it catches you off guard. Speaking of being caught off guard, I wasn't expecting Control to provide such a satisfying gameplay experience on top of all this weirdness. The game's mechanical focus is on combat, using a range of paranatural superpowers in conjunction with the service weapon, a shape-shifting gun that fills a number of different roles, and that combat is very solid overall. Control doesn't bring a ton of new things to the table in terms of weapons or abilities, giving you access to a standard range of gun types and some pretty tried and true special abilities like telekinesis, and these are pretty satisfying to use thanks to some fantastic reaction animations and effects. Honestly, shooting a monster in the head and seeing them stumble back onto the ground dazed is pretty rewarding. Adding to the enjoyment of Control's combat is the generous yet unintrusive aim assist that you get while aiming from the hip and using telekinesis. It's not so generous that finesse aiming doesn't work better, but it allows you to play in a much more mobile style, which Control encourages by not really having much in the way of a cover system. The game also does this fantastic thing where all of your abilities and weapons operate on a cooldown instead of requiring ammo or meters that need to be refilled. This means you're free to spend less time scrounging for items and ammo, and instead are encouraged to constantly change up your method of attack while one resource is on cooldown. The only combat-related element that doesn't recharge over time is your health, instead relying on pickups dropped from fallen enemies. This generally works pretty well, though I did find that I often died on top of these health pickups, which could be a little frustrating. The frustration of dying is exacerbated somewhat by Control's checkpoint system, which, to its credit, won't reset your progress, but will set you a fair way back if you don't make a conscious decision to interact with nearby checkpoints before you die. Beyond combat, there are some puzzles to tackle in the game, though they're much more situational and far less common than the game's combat encounters. That said, they are fairly enjoyable. Control's puzzles tend to rely on environmental information and logic, and though few of them will have you stumped for very long, I found they were pretty enjoyable little challenges to break up the combat. To be entirely honest, I probably would have enjoyed my time with Control based purely on its atmosphere and writing alone, regardless of the quality of its combat or puzzles. But on that note, I have to say, the level of detail Control brings to the table during combat encounters was a constant source of surprise and delight. From the aforementioned enemy reaction animations to the trippy explosive effect that triggers upon their death, the game manages to keep encounters interesting looking no matter how many times you fight the same handful of enemies through each journey through the Bureau. Hell, the level of environmental destruction on display is impressive on its own, with chunks of wall and floor being ripped away by gunfire, and particle effects gathering around any chunk of environment you pick up with your telekinesis. This level of detail doesn't come without some caveats though. Control does have some performance issues, on the PS4 Pro at least. Large amounts of destruction or explosions can make the game's frame rate chug pretty badly, and upon leaving the pause screen or even cutscenes, the game locks up consistently. It even crashed on me once for no discernible reason. So, if you do have multiple platforms to choose from, maybe keep this in mind. Now, these issues weren't frequent enough or severe enough to negatively impact my enjoyment of the game, but if that's something that could get to you, then I'd recommend checking it out on the Xbox One X or on a decently powerful PC. No matter what platform you choose to play Control on, there's so much side content on top of the fairly long main story, and all of it is worth checking out. Even the collectible notes and video logs are worth finding, which is more than I can say about most games, so I think it's safe to say that Control, in my opinion at least, will give you plenty of bang for your buck. Frankly, I don't want to say a lot more about the game for fear of spoiling something. It's the kind of game where the less you know going in, the better, you know? Really, my biggest complaint with Control is that it keeps throwing more inconsequential content at you as you play, in the form of timed challenges and the like. But all of those are easy enough to ignore, and you get so much good content that it's hard to complain, you know? With that said, Control is excellent. It's spooky, it's weird, and it raises more questions than it ultimately answers, but Control is a must-play as far as I'm concerned. As I said earlier, I probably would have enjoyed this game even if it was just a walking simulator set in the same world, with the same tone, but having such well-rounded gunplay, clever puzzles, and unique ways to interact with certain elements of the game's world sure don't hurt it. If you're a fan of Remedy's previous work, then you'll probably love this, and if you've never played a Remedy game in your life, this is a good one to get in on.